Everyone. I am attorney Lilian with Lily Legal. I am a US-based immigration lawyer, and we're going to be talking about all the crazy changes and things going on, from the travel bans to ICE activities to what you can do as far as your cases as you are moving through the US immigration law system. So the first thing you need to really think about when it comes to the travel bans is your country just on the travel ban list, or is it only on the 75 country pause list? Because the effect is different. Okay, if your country is on the travel ban list and the 75 country pause list, your effect is going to be that USCIS will not approve your case, and the embassy would not approve your case either because you're on the travel ban list. But if you're only on the 75 country ban pause list, USCIS can approve your case. Your case can go through the National Visa Center. They can schedule you for an interview, and they will do your interview. The only thing they cannot do is approve your case. So when you go to your interview, it will be a normal interview. And the officer will need to figure out if there's any other reason that you do not qualify for that visa. And if they cannot find any other reason that you do not qualify for the visa, they will deny you based on the 75 country pause. But if they can find other reasons, like there was misrepresentation in the past or there was a criminal case, they will refuse you the visa based on those other reasons. But if the only reason they have is this pause, then they will refuse you based on the pause. And that's a good thing. Okay, if there's nothing else they can refuse you under and it's just this, that's a good thing, because that means when the pause lifts, you, my friend, will get your visa. Okay, so once the pause lifts, you will be able to get a visa, but before that, you just wouldn't. Okay, what can you do while you're waiting on this craziness to stop and to end so that you can actually get some normalcy? Like, nothing is normal right now, but what you can do is, depending on the type of case you have, you can start thinking about what additional evidence can I start putting together. I did a video, I believe last week, where I talked about creating like a binder or a folder where you are storing your evidence so that every single month you can upload documents to that folder or print out stuff and put it into a physical folder. That way, when you are going through, while you're waiting, you're building the evidence for your case, especially if you are in a marriage-based case, which again, if you're in a travel ban country, you're going to be waiting for that to be lifted for USCIS to take action on your case. So you want to make sure that you are continuing to build out your evidence, because if, let's say, hopefully not, but let's say it takes a year for your country to be taken off the banned list, you're going to want to update your evidence for that year. What happened while this ban was going on and USCIS was not able to process your application? What do you have to show about your relationship? So you really want to make sure that you use this time wisely, like you use it to your advantage. Okay, now you have time to build more evidence. Let's say you filed and you did not have a lot of evidence to present to USCIS. That's fine. Okay, use this time that your country is on a travel ban to build that evidence and keep it in a folder, either digitally or a physical folder that you can then use once USCIS starts processing cases, once they start scheduling cases for interviews. Now you have a whole folder that you can take to your interview of all the evidence you have of your relationship. So if nothing else, do that. I also talked about, sometimes getting away from the immigration stuff. I know I'm doing a live right now and you're joining me on this live to learn more about immigration things, but sometimes you do need to take a break from all of it and just maybe just for a brief moment focus on something else so that you are not just drowning in immigration news and things. Okay, I am doing the same thing. Like I said, I've been an immigration lawyer for 10 years, and this is the worst I have seen and felt about US immigration. So I am taking my own advice and taking time sometimes away to basically refocus and figure out the best way to move forward. So I understand when you have to do the same thing, it's okay. All right. If you need to take a break from all the news and all of that, please take a break. It is okay to take a break from all of it. All right. If you're joining me live and you have questions, please put it in the comments. That's literally what I'm here for. Okay. So make sure you ask me your questions in the comments. All right. So as far as the travel bans, like I said, you just have to wait for that to end. And for USCIS, okay, for USCIS, they did say that they're giving themselves 90 days to reevaluate and figure out priorities as far as opening back up, making decisions on cases and things like that. So 30 days, that 90 days will be up April 1st. So we're hoping that on April 1st or soon after, USCIS will be able to put out updated policy on what cases they are prioritizing to actually get to interview, to actually get decisions on. Again, USCIS is completely different from embassy. Okay, so remember, if your country is not on the travel banned list but it's on the 75 country list, your case is still going to move forward if it's on the 75 country list with USCIS. Okay, if you're on the travel banned country list, USCIS has a pause on your cases. So on April 1st or soon after that, hopefully we get a new policy update that tells us which cases they may be moving forward with and which ones they're putting a pause on. One question that I get a lot about the travel ban is, what about cases that already had an interview? So if your case already had an interview and your country is on the travel ban list, which means USCIS paused the decision, it still affects you. So even if you're applying for citizenship, even if you're applying for a green card, that pause will still affect you if your country is on the travel ban list, regardless of what stage of the process you're in. Okay, the pause stops USCIS from making decisions on your case. It does not stop them from sending you biometrics notice. It does not stop them from looking at your case and sending you a request for evidence. Okay, it just stops them from actually making a decision, which is why they're not scheduling interviews, because typically that's the last step. In most cases, is once you have your interview, USCIS officers can now make a decision on whether to approve your case or not. So we're seeing those interviews not be scheduled. And we saw a lot of them in December get descheduled because USCIS just knew they weren't going to make decisions on those cases, and they now want to put the resources towards those cases. Okay, so that is that on the travel ban. We're just waiting and seeing. There are lawsuits. I know people want to know. If you're under 75 countries, I'm trying to remember all the lawsuits. There's so many lawsuits, but there is one currently for the 75 countries that people can still join in on. The ones for the travel banned countries, I believe they have closed the lawsuit as far as people joining in on the lawsuit. But the 75 countries, if you are affected, you can choose to join the lawsuit on that. And there is a fee. There's a specific law firm that is filing those lawsuits. So you can choose to join the lawsuit. And what typically happens is, if the judge agrees with the plaintiffs, which are the people suing the government, then the people that joined in on the lawsuit would actually have their cases adjudicated. Right. Sometimes the judge would expand it beyond the people in that specific lawsuits, but we're seeing what we saw in the past is that when it is an issue with the embassy, the lawsuits are typically limited to the people that are involved in the case. So the people that are the plaintiffs, the people that did pay the law firm to join the case. So if you're interested in that and want to know more about that lawsuit, please let me know. I will gladly find the link to the law firm and put it in the comments to this video after the live. I should have pulled it up, but I did not have it on me. So I will gladly do that. So just let me know if you're watching this now, or if you're watching this on a replay and you're like, oh, I really would like that link to see what's going on with that lawsuit, just let me know. I'll gladly put it in the comments. Also, there is a lawsuit for the travel ban countries. Like I said, the plaintiffs are locked in for that. However, they are suing not just the embassy, but also USCIS, because USCIS also has a pause in making decisions for the travel ban countries. So what could happen is that it could only be just for those plaintiffs, but it could expand beyond those plaintiffs. And if those plaintiffs are able to get their case approved, that means it opens it up for everyone else to go ahead and file their own lawsuits. So these are kind of the sample cases to see if the judges are going to buy the argument that is being made, and hopefully they do buy the argument and force USCIS and the embassies to continue processing and approving cases. So we will see. We will see what happens with those, but those are just starting. Those are not like lawsuits that already have a trial or anything like that. So those are lawsuits that are just starting. So we just going to have to wait and see what happens with those. And hopefully it goes well for us and people are able to get their cases approved. And then I also got a question about work permits. If you are on the travel ban countries that USCIS has put a pause on, unfortunately, you are also affected even if you're applying for a work permit, unless it is based on your refugee status or asylee status. But everyone else, if it's adjustment of status and you are applying for a work permit and your country is on a pause with USCIS, unfortunately, your work permit is also on pause. You can try, try to argue with USCIS, which we are doing in my office. We're sending service requests and we're sending expedite requests just to, see if something is going to work, but they are being very, very strict when it comes to that. So work permits are unfortunately also affected by this travel ban and paused by USCIS. Okay, so if you are joining me, please ask me questions in the comments. I truly appreciate you all joining me. Next thing I want to talk about is the Visa Bulletin. I do have a video coming up next week on the Visa Bulletin for the February Visa Bulletin, but just highlights. Nothing really happened. The only country that saw movement, and it's only in 2 categories, is Mexico. Every other country is just waiting. Okay, there wasn't a lot of movement, but little movement is better than no movement, honestly, when it comes to the Visa Bulletin. The Visa Bulletin is basically the way that the State Department, the embassies tell us how many visas they have left, right? Who can actually get their visa approved based on when you filed your initial application. So if you have a petition pending and it was filed by a parent, when did that parent file your I-130? That's going to determine when there would be a visa available. And typically, the only people that do not have to look at the visa bulletin are immediate relatives of US citizens, meaning spouses, parents, minor children that are unmarried of US citizens. So if you're not an immediate relative of a US citizen and you have a petition pending, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to the visa bulletin, because that's going to tell you realistically, right? Realistically, how long do you have to wait for this visa to actually get in your hands? Okay. How long do you have to wait for the National Visa Center to send you the welcome email and give you the login credentials for you to start your visa application? Right. That's what the two charts on the visa bulletin does. And again, if you're not an immediate relative of a US citizen, you really want to make sure that you understand the visa bulletin and you're paying attention to the visa bulletin. And like I said, I have a video that's coming up next week on the February Visa Bulletin. I try to do a visa bulletin video every single month, just so you can stay up to date on what's going on and have like a quick, this is everything you need to know. This is where there's movement, this is where there's no movement, so that you know and can follow along on how the visa bulletin works and how it could affect your category. Okay. Again, if you are joining me live and you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I truly appreciate y'all taking the time to join me. Oh, and can you tell me in the comments, if you're joining me live, if this time works for you? Okay, this is a new time for me. I usually, last year I was doing the lives in the middle of the day, but this just works better for my schedule and my kids' schedule and everything. So if this works for you, just give me a thumbs up, or just let me know in the comments, because I truly want to make sure that it does work for y'all. And it is a good time to do these lives. Again, I appreciate y'all joining me on a Sunday night of all nights. But like I said, this is just the time that has really worked for my schedule. I've been trying to find a good time to do these lives again. I was doing them every single week last year until November hit, and like my schedule blew up and I just wasn't able to do them on Fridays anymore, and I just couldn't find another time. But Sundays are looking good. Sundays are looking good. So please let me know if this works. And if you have any questions, like I said, I am here to answer your questions and give guidance where I can. There is a lot of changes. There are a lot of changes going on, and being able to answer your questions is just great. So please feel free to ask me your questions. Now, I'm going to, because people do send me questions ahead of time, I'm going to try to answer some of those while I am here with you all, because again, I truly do appreciate the time that you're taking here. All right, so I have gotten quite a few questions about adoption and how adoptions work as far as immigration is concerned, okay? Because let's be honest, when it comes to immigration and the things that we talk about, we really want to focus on whatever you're doing. If you're trying to adopt a child, for example, you need to make sure that you are not starting with the adoption. You are starting with the immigration part if the child is outside of the US, because that's going to make the difference of whether you can bring that child into the US or not. Okay. I know it should be simple, right? It should be easy enough for you to bring your child to the US once you file for them. However, the US government has a specific process that you need to go through. So you need to think about that before you even start the adoption process. So if your child, the first thing you need to check before you do anything else, before you finalize any adoption, before you file any adoption paperwork in that country, is find out, is that country part of the Hague Convention? Okay, is that country part of the Hague Convention? Because if it is, and you go ahead and complete that adoption, it doesn't count because you did not go through the proper process, especially if you're a US citizen, right? The Hague Convention only applies to US citizens. It does not apply to permanent residents. Okay, let's start there. If you're a US citizen and you're adopting outside of the US and you're now already working with an adoption service provider, an adoption agency that's telling you that you need to check if that child is in a Hague Convention country, please check that first. Because if that child is part of the Hague Convention countries, you need to make sure that you are following every single step in the right order, or you're not going to be able to bring that child into the US. I have had to have this conversation with so many parents that it is heartbreaking. So when it comes to adoptions, you need to be careful. You need to make sure that that child is not part of a Hague Convention country. And if they are part of a Hague Convention country, that you are starting your process with an adoption service provider and following every single step that the Hague Convention requires. And the final step in the process of the Hague Convention is the actual adoption of the child. So if you already did the adoption and the process requires that the last step be the actual adoption, that means you have to start everything all over again. And if that child already turned 16, you are out of luck. So it's really important that you are paying attention to that, because again, I have seen so many parents just disappointed, right? That's their child. They already adopted the child, but they're not able to bring their child to the US to join them because they didn't follow the Hague Convention. So that's the first step if you want to adopt. Are they part of the Hague Convention? And if they're not, then you have two options. Are they considered an orphan? And if they are considered an orphan, then you can go through the orphan process. If they're not considered an orphan, then you have to go through the relative petition process, which is the I-130. And here's the thing about that I-130 process for adoption. You have to live with that child in their country for 2 years. And I do not mean, before people tell me, well, I'm the one paying for where they live, I'm the one paying for their school, that's not living with the child. Okay? You need to move from the US and live with that child in their country for 2 years before you can do the relative petition, the I-130 for the child. And only if you're married, only one of you have to do it, not both of you. Okay? But this is really, again, a point that people miss is the fact that the Hague Convention is a thing, the orphan process is a thing, and they assume, another thing I see is people assume that they can just go straight to doing an I-130 for their adopted child, not understanding that that I-130 is going to ask you if you lived with that child for 2 years, and if you can prove that you lived with that child for 2 years. And if you cannot prove that you lived with the child for 2 years, guess what's going to happen? It's going to be denied, and that child will not be able to come to the US and live with you, which is all you want. You just want to be with your child. So, if nothing else, because again, I get this question so much that I have to address it. If you are, thinking about adopting a child that is outside of the US, please pay attention to that. Please pay attention to the Hague Convention. Do not complete the adoption until you speak to an immigration lawyer to make sure that you can actually go ahead and complete the adoption. Do not complete the adoption until you speak with an adoption service provider to make sure that you are doing that, okay? Are we talking about children over here? So for the adoption, we're talking about children outside of the US, not children in the US. So if you are adopting a child outside of the US, you need to pay attention to the Hague Convention. But if the child is in the US and they're a US citizen, or they're not, they don't have a legal status, but they're physically in the US, you need to go through the US adoption system. Okay, you still need to pay attention to what is going on. Who are worth more? Okay, I'm just going to move right along. All children have a worth to their parents, right? All children are worthy to be loved by parents. So if a child is adopted from the US, that's great. If a child is adopted from outside of the US, that child will now have a parents, right? If a child is adopted in the US, those children will now have parents. So there is a worth in adoption, and I strongly believe in adoption. Can I file for my under 21 child from Nigeria as a US citizen? Yes, you can file the application, but remember, okay. Yes, you can file for your child that's under 21 that's from Nigeria. The travel ban means that USCIS will not make a decision on the case, but that doesn't stop you from filing the application. And actually, I'm telling people, if you qualify for it, you want to go ahead and file and not wait, because the longer you wait, depending on how old the child is, you don't want to take the chance that they age out before you start the process. So you want to, especially if the child is under the age of 21, you don't want to wait. You want to file that I-130, because their age is going to be based on when you file that. Okay. USCIS delay in doing that is not, USCIS delaying your process is not going to affect your child being considered under 21, even if they age out after you file. So you want to make sure that you are filing for your child. Okay. Okay. All right. So when it comes to US citizens, remember, US citizens can file for their children regardless of where their children live. Okay. Okay. Dark Prince 6284. I didn't say there's anything wrong with his comment. He can make his comment. However, is it appropriate? Can we talk about that? Okay. Again, parents, US citizens, if hear me now, US citizens can file for their children. If someone moves from Nigeria and moves to the US and goes through the process of becoming a US citizen, they are allowed to file for their child. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you don't like it or not. The US laws clearly state that a US citizen can file for their children, regardless of where their children are, and bring them to the US to live with them. Okay? Feel free to ask me more questions, guys. This is great conversation because, again, I'm not, I want to make sure that if you do have an immigration question, that I am answering it. Good for you, Dark Prince. That's such a name. Good for you. Unfortunately, the US was never a white country, so all right. Moving on. If anyone else has any questions, please put them in the comments. Again, part of the questions I get ahead of time, like I said, had a lot to do with the travel ban, had a lot to do with adoption. So feel free to ask me your questions. Remember, if you are a permanent resident of the United States, you can only file for your spouse and your children that are unmarried. Okay? Because I've had a few people, while the process is going on of filing for their children got married, so they were no longer able to file for that child. So remember, if you are a permanent resident and you are filing for your child, just remind them, what if they get married before you become a US citizen, the whole process ends and they need to figure it out. Okay? Okay. Great question, Victor. When the child arrives in the US, will they live here for 5 years as a permanent resident for 5 years before getting citizenship? It depends. So, in order to apply for citizenship, which people naturalization is either 5 years or 3 years. However, children under the age of 18 cannot apply for naturalization. If you meet the requirements, they may be able to derive citizenship from you, meaning if they are under the age of 18 when they come to the US, you were already a US citizen by the time they arrive and they live with you. According to the law, they automatically, upon entering the US, become US citizens. Now, don't just stop there, right? Yes, the law says that, but you want to go a step further and get them a certificate of citizenship. Yes, an N600, you want to make sure you do that because then they will forever have proof of their citizenship. If you just do the passport, remember your passport expires, and every single time the passport expires, the child will now have to go through the whole process of proving that they lived with you before they turned 18, that they entered the US as permanent residents, and that you were a US citizen. So getting that certificate of citizenship is the way to go. Can I file for a Thai woman that isn't married to me yet, but over 16, but under 18 as a US citizen? Okay, interesting question. Can you file for someone that you're not married to? You need to, the only way to file for someone that you are currently not married to is them being your child, them being your fiance. So if you're a US citizen, you can file for a fiance, but you need to look at the state that you live in. So each state has the legal marriage age. And in order for you to file for someone, depending on the state you live in, it needs to be legal in that state for you to get married. And if it's not legal in that state, then USCIS is not going to approve it. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure if that does or not. I'm not advocating for it, but it needs to be legal in the state. And most states, legal marriage age is 18. In some, it's not. So it depends on the state the person lives in. All right. Again, it's going to be up to USCIS because USCIS evaluates every single case, every single marriage-based case, to make sure that it's not against public policy, it's not against the law, right? So even if the marriage would be legal in that country, USCIS will need to make sure that it's legal in the US and it's not against US public policy. And typically, when it comes to underage marriage, again, it depends on if it's legal in your state, right? In some states, so some countries allow first cousin marriage. I'm just going to use that as an example. Most states in the US do not. There are states in the US that do. And if you are filing for your first cousin that you're married to, you need to make sure that you live in a state that allows that, right? Because USCIS will not approve it otherwise. Do I support an adult being in a relationship with a 16-year-old? Personally, no, but I'm not USCIS, so I can't say if USCIS would approve it. So when it comes to that filing, so if you're asking me the immigration part of it, I don't get to decide if it's going to be allowed or not. USCIS will have to decide that. If you're talking about personally, do I support that? No, I don't think a 16-year-old should be getting married or worrying about marriage. But again, that's just me. That's just me, right? That's just me. All right. Feel free to ask me more questions, guys. This okay. Okay, guys. All right. So, if you have any other US immigration related questions, please go ahead and put it in the comments. Some of the questions are not immigration related, so I'm not going to really address it. Do you like Nigeria, Lily? Oh, I'm sorry. I should have I should have introduced myself. I was born in Nigeria. I am an immigrant to the US. So, yes, I do like Nigeria. I do like the US. But yes, I did immigrate to the US when I was 11 years old. Um through a petition filed by my father, and I have lived in the US ever since. Are visiting visas easy to get? And what countries are visitors visas easy to get? European countries, like if I'm being honest, they're easy to get if you're in a European country and you're a citizen of a European country. It's easier. They're easy to get if you are wealthy. Okay. Um, I'm trying to think of other ways to, but yeah, they're easy to get if you are wealthy in a European country and if you are well known in your field, right? For example, if you are an actor, a musician, things like that, it will be easier for you to get a visiting visa to the US than if you are a student that hasn't graduated or that just graduated and doesn't have a job and your parents do not have money. It's not easy, okay? Is interview family-based F1 move a bit fast? Mm, Okay, let me see if I understand the question before I answer it. Are you okay? For what country? Oh, for a country that's not banned. F1, do you mean the children of US citizens that are unmarried F1? Just want to make sure I understand. Please clarify your question. Love is asking, what are the requirements for a visiting visa? The biggest requirement for a visiting visa is that you can show and document that you have ties to your home country, right? That you have, the way I like to put it to people is that they want to see that you have so much going on for you in your country that you will not have a reason to stay in the US. Right? You have a job, you have properties, you have businesses that rely on you. You have employees that rely on you, right? You are an executive in a company and the company is giving you like a short leave. They want to see that you have money, right? Those are the things they are looking at when it comes to that. So the more of those ties to your country you can show, the better. And then depending on your reason for the coming to the US, you need to also document those reasons. So let's say, for example, you want to come to the US for the World Cup. You need to make sure that you can actually afford to go to the World Cup. Okay. I had to look at the tickets recently for the World Cup games that are happening in Massachusetts, and those tickets starting at $900. And if you want, and that's for like super far. If you want to be close, you're looking at almost $2,000 for just one game during the World Cup. So you need to be able to prove those things, that you can actually afford those tickets and that you can actually afford whatever it is that you're coming to the US for. Okay. Okay. Um, Aka. So when it comes to F1 for unmarried children of US citizens, unfortunately, for this month, for February, there wasn't really any movement. I'm so sorry. There wasn't any movement. So is it it's not that it's moving fast, it's or slow, it's just there's no movement one way or another, at least for February. I would say keep an eye on the visa bulletin. I do a video every single month on the visa bulletin. So keep an eye on that because that's going to tell you when movements happen. All right. Does the 75 country immigration ban affect people's cases who are already legally in the United States? So there's an overlap between the 75 countries and the travel ban countries. So if your country is on the 75 country, but not on any of the travel ban lists, then no, it doesn't affect your case if you are in the US as of now, right? USCIS has not said that it would affect cases. Those are strictly the embassy pausing. Okay. But if your case is also, if your country is also on the travel ban list, then yes, it will stop you. It will have an effect in the US with USCIS. But if it's only on the 75 country list, then you don't have to worry about it for now if you're in the US. Um, okay. So Bob Droid. I wouldn't know. Okay. So most European Okay, I'm moving on. Most European countries will want you to have a valid passport. Well, you need a valid passport to travel outside of the US. So maybe start there. Who makes the decision to be approved for a visiting visa? The officer that interviews you. So, um, when you go to your interview can be anywhere from like a couple minutes to 20 minutes. Okay, it's not going to be long at all. And it's up to that officer to make that decision. And typically, depending on the country you're in, they're making that decision before you even walk in the door, depending on what they already found on you and what your application says you're coming to the US to do, what your application says you make a year. All those things matter. So you want to make sure that you are, you know, completing your application correctly. You're paying attention to your public information and things like that. I'm trying to see. All right, tourist visa is easy to get. Uh, and what is the require? Oh my goodness, I feel like questions are just um coming and people are having conversations. Please continue having conversations with each other in the comments. um I'm just trying to keep up with everything, but yeah, feel free to have conversations. um And then let's see. I have a 1 year since my waiver 601 was approved. What do you think about it? So if you're 601, question, are you in the US or outside of the US? That's going to make a huge difference. If you are dealing with the embassy, have you reached out to the embassy to let them know that your application has been approved? Okay, that your 601 has been approved. That's typically where you want to start. So once that 601 is approved, if you're dealing with the embassy, you want to send them an email or a message letting them know with proof that your 601 was approved and requesting a follow-up interview, because they always do a follow-up interview. So just be prepared for that as well. Inside the US, um, is with a I-485. So if it's with an I-485 and the I-485 is still pending, then you would reach out to USCIS and follow up with them. All right. Okay, guys. Love, please feel free to send me an email or schedule a consultation. I'll happily tell you the fees. I just need more information about you to be able to actually give you a quote. Oh, a 601A waiver was approved. Okay. So if your 601A waiver is approved, that's a different process than if it was a 601 waiver. So a 601 waiver gives you the ability to then leave the US for your interview once your interview is scheduled, but you need to make sure that you completed your National Visa Center process. So the National Visa Center would want you to do your DS-260, do your affidavit of support, and get that completely done and get documentarily qualified, because getting documentarily qualified is what gets you in line for an interview. So if you have not done any of that, the embassy is not going to reach out to you. The National Visa Center is not going to do anything for you. So if your 601A is approved, congratulations, because those take time. I know how long those take, so congratulations. But make sure that you are following through with the National Visa Center, because remember, the whole point of the 601A waiver is for you to leave the US eventually to go to your interview. So you need to get in line for an interview and get that interview. All right. Okay, question. I am a US citizen. Also, my original country is part of 75 countries ban. The question, is it possible for me to adopt my nephew who has an F1 visa? It depends on how old your nephew is. If your nephew is already over the age of 16, and typically if they have an F1 visa, they most likely are, unless they're going to high school in the US. But if your nephew is already over the age of 16, you would not be able to adopt. You will be able to adopt them, but it would not have an immigration effect. So you would not be able to file for them as your child under US immigration laws. Can someone self-petition, and how hard is that process? Gail, can you give me more information about, there's so many different paths of self-petition. Are you talking about on the business immigration end of self-petition? Feel free to give me more detail. I'll be happy to answer. Okay, guys, I'm about to I am about to just go ahead and block some of you, because this is a lot. This is a lot. These comments are a lot. So if you have US immigration questions for a US immigration attorney, please feel free to ask. Okay. So love, yes, I do charge for a detailed consultation. It is $75. I do have also a free strategy session. But right now all the spots are booked until April for the free strategy session. So like I said, we do have the paid consultations and you can probably get in like next week. But as far as the free one, we're booked up till April. So you can still go and book it, but you just wouldn't be able to get until April. Okay. Wow. Okay. So yes. So if they're 24, unfortunately, adoption would not work as a way to then petition for them to get status in the US. Okay. Adoption for immigration, for you to then file for the child to come and live with you in the US must take place, like that whole process, whether you're doing Hague Convention or orphan or the I-130 process. That adoption has to take place before that child turns 16. Okay. Before they turn 16, the adoption has to take place. So that's really important as well. Okay, I-130, not business. Oh, so self-petition for an I-130 is not a thing. So you're not able to self-petition for an I-130. An I-130 is a relative petition, meaning a relative has to file it for you. If you were married to a US citizen or a permanent resident and were a victim of abuse, you may be able to self-petition an I-360, a VAWA application, but an I-130 is specifically for a relative filing for you. How long do I have to wait after meeting my girlfriend before we can get married? It's up to you and your girlfriend. USCIS is not checking that. They're checking the relationship, right? Are you two genuinely in a relationship? Are you really looking to build a life together? That's what they're looking for. They're not, the length of time that you're together helps, but it's not a requirement that you are like, you meet and then that's it. Okay. I have had clients that were in a relationship and did not meet in person. Like they were in a relationship for like years and then met in person. The first time they met in person, they got married and then started the process. So USCIS is not really looking at that. They're looking at the relationship. So pay attention to the relationship. Okay. How long after marriage should we wait before filing okay. So if you're both in the US, again, there's no time frame. It's about you and your spouse and your relationship. So if you have evidence of your relationship, if you are living together with your spouse, if you are building a future with your spouse, that's what USCIS is going to be paying attention to. So they do not have like a waiting period. Right. We've had people that applied right after getting married, like the day after they got married, because they've been together for so long that that was just the last thing they were waiting on is that marriage certificate to start the process. So USCIS is not looking at how long you've been married. They're looking at your relationship. Are you planning to be together for the rest of your life? And can you show proof that that's the plan you have? Okay. All right. So I live in the US, but my family live in Canada and just had a newborn in Canada in November. I want to apply for CRBA for my baby. Should I use US address for the application or the Canada address? It's up to you. It doesn't matter, right? Typically for the CRBA, they with Canada, they may mail it to you. So whatever address needs to be an address that you can get mail at. But most embassies will have you come and pick it up, the certificate up. So you don't really need to worry too much about that. For most of my clients, we put a US address just because it's a mail-in address. And some countries do not have actual mail-in addresses that the embassy can send mail to. But Canada is very different. So you may want to do that. Can you tell me how long it will take to get a visiting visa approved if all documents are sent in? So when it comes to visiting visas, you do not send the documents in, you bring the documents to the interview. Depending on the country, it can be anywhere. The length of time to an interview after you file the application can be anywhere from a month to 2 or 3 years, depending on the country. I will. So, um, based on the engagements today, I will probably be live on Sundays. So I will be back next Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So feel free to join me then if you have immigration questions or want more immigration information. Okay, if a petitioner died while waiting approval, what's your next steps? So it's going to depend. So you need to first off inform, depending on where you are in the process. If it's USCIS, you need to inform USCIS, and if it's the spouse, then if it's your spouse, then you want to make sure that you're informing USCIS because that's going to go change your petition from a spousal petition to an I-360 widow or widower petition. Okay, so that is done automatically if you actually notify US immigration of the death of the petitioner. Depending if it's the child of the petitioner, you may be able to get the I-130 reinstated if the I-130 is already approved. Okay, if the I-130 is not approved and it's not the spouse, you're basically out of luck. But if the I-130 is already approved, you may be able to get the I-130 reinstated and continue with the process. But again, you need to notify US immigration that the petitioner has passed away. You will need to have, if it's a reinstatement of the I-130, you need to have someone else that's willing to do the affidavit of support that is somewhere in some way closely related to the beneficiary. Okay, so those things do still matter, but there are steps that you can take depending on um, who the beneficiary is. Now, if the beneficiary has children, right, and so for just for information purposes, that's not your this is not your question, but let's say the principal beneficiary passes away, the derivative beneficiaries are not able to do anything unless they're physically in the US. Okay, if they're not physically in the US, that application goes away. Mm, all right. Okay. Do a person applying for tourist visa need to have a certain amount in the bank account? You you want to show that you have money. Like I said, there's no certain amount. It depends on what you're coming to the US for. Like it depends on what you say you do and how much is going to be expected of you, right? If you're coming to visit a relative and you're telling the embassy that you're going to stay at a hotel and that you have the funds to do that, your bank account should reflect that, right? Your bank account should reflect that. So the more money, right? More money is more money when it comes to the visiting visa. More money is more money. So the more, okay, so if you're coming on vacation, you need to make sure you have a plan for where you're staying, what activities you're doing, and if you can prepay for those things, that's going to be helpful. You also may want to, because the visiting visa is not guaranteed, I always tell people if you can get a refundable ticket, a refundable everything, do that, just because it's not guaranteed that you're going to be approved, and you do not want to also be out of a lot of money. Like, I've had people pay for Disney and not get their visa. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're really considering the full picture before you do that. Yes, so depending on who the beneficiary is, right? Again, like I said, if it is the spouse of the petitioner, then the application will change from the I-130 to an I-360 automatically. And the I-360 does not need a sponsor. Okay. If it's not, if it's not the spouse, then you need to look at, was the I-130 already approved? If the I-130 was already approved, you may be able to get it reinstated. But the first step is getting that reinstatement. And yes, you need to have someone else that can step in as a sponsor. Mhm. Yeah, you would need someone else to step in as a sponsor. All right. So remember, if you have any US immigration questions for me, please feel free to put it in the comments. Um, I am more than happy to answer your questions. Yeah, so for those of you that are actually here for US immigration and you are seeing the comments, I am so sorry. I am, again, so sorry because they are not kind in some ways, but hey, it's okay. It's okay. We're it's the world. We're in the world. All right. So, if anyone else has US immigration questions, please feel free to put it in the comments. If not, I will have to say good night, and I will see you guys next week on Sunday at the same time, because I am more than happy to continue these conversations and continue talking to you about US immigration, because again, it is changing every single day. And the more you know, the more you're able to protect yourself and your families. And I hope you all, so Gail, yes, unapproved is an issue, but feel free to reach out for a consultation, because that would be the way to go with that. Okay. Because I will need more information to be able to actually tell you specifically if in your case it can be overcome. Okay. All right. So feel free to schedule a consultation with me. I just put the ticker up. So you'll be able to see the website is also in the description to the video, so you can schedule that if it's needed. Is there a waiver for not traveling for a fiancé visa? You mean that you were approved for a fiancé visa, but you never traveled on the fiancé visa? Is that what you mean? If that's what you mean, then there's no waiver required. Like, just because you were approved for a visa doesn't mean you need to travel on the visa. So if, let's say, you were approved for a fiancé visa and then the relationship breaks down, you just don't travel on the visa. Okay. So you need to, okay, feel peer feel free to schedule a strategy, a consultation. But when it comes to that, if you are already documentarily qualified, that's a key. If you're already documentarily qualified, then it may just be that they're waiting for a visa date to come up for you before they will do anything. So typically, if your case is documentarily qualified with the National Visa Center, you're not going to hear from them until they have something to tell you, right? Sometimes they may reach out to you every like few months to be like, hey, we know your case is still here, but there's no visa available. There's no appointment available yet, right? And then the next time they reach out to you, maybe to tell you that, hey, you're scheduled for an interview at this on this date at this times. Okay. So you need to just know that depending on the country you're from, it may just be that you're waiting for an interview. I can tell you before the travel ban went into place for Nigeria, it was taking about 2 years minimum to get an interview. Okay. And that's after being documentarily qualified. So just keep an eye on that. And like I said, if you have gone through the whole process of the DS-260 and all of that, then you can just keep an eye on the country and just know that it may just not be you. It may just be that they're waiting for the embassy to give them an appointment for you, and then they'll reach out and let you know when that appointment is scheduled. Oh, thank you, Pierre. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Truly, truly, this is my first live for the year. Actually, my first live since November. So thank you all so much for joining me and for your very, very good questions. Please keep them coming. Like I said, I'll be back next week, Sunday at 6 p.m. So just know I'll be here. So bring your question. And Pierre, yes, definitely. That's a problem. That's going to be the issue. And also remember, Haiti's on the travel ban as well. So you need to, there's like multiple things going on. An interview not being available, because also remember the embassy in Haiti is closed, right? So the US embassy in Haiti is closed. Haiti is also on the travel ban list. So all those things are kind of working against you here. All right. But just stay strong. Okay. I want to thank you all for joining me. I will see you next time. And I hope you have a great a great week ahead and a great night. For those of you that were not asking immigration questions in the comments, feel free to join and, just learn with us, as always. But yeah, please stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye.